Hello and welcome to my channel, Haylee Marie Vintage. This week we have another travel vlog, so you know what that means. This video is going to be the travel vlog showing you everything I did on my travels, and Friday I will do the haul video of the various things I pick up while I'm out and about on vacation. So this time we are headed to Cape Cod for a family vacation, so I'm meeting up with my sisters and parents, and I will be compiling a map of everything we did, everywhere we ate, all that stuff that I'll have linked down below in case it's helpful if you're using this to plan Cape Cod travels. So I'm pretty excited and we're just gonna hop right into the footage. So to get to Cape Cod, I'm first landing in Boston. I am the last to arrive of all of my family, so I have to get through the airport and then have them pick me up in their rental. Coming into Boston, I don't think I really truly understood the amount of water around Boston, which sounds really silly when you think about all the things that Boston's known for, but for some reason I just didn't relate it to all this water and boats and greenery and stuff. So it was just kind of fun to fly in and see all that. And once I met up with my family, we got in the car and are ready to drive. Traffic around the airport was insane. I've never seen an airport with so much traffic around it, and that's so hard to get in and out of. I don't know if it's just the weekend we were there were closures and events and stuff, but now I feel like I understand why most cities don't put their airport right smack dab in the middle of their city, because this was not very fun. And if I wasn't already determined to visit Boston, my experience just of us trying to drive out of the area that the airport was in would be enough to make me not want to come back. But Boston seems like a cool city, so I'll be back anyway, but wow, that traffic was awful. But after a few hours of driving, we are finally arriving at the house that we're staying. That's in Yarmouth, I believe. I'm not going to show you all of the house, but I do want to say this house was absolutely beautifully done. This is like a family run rental. I'll link it if I can find it. And yeah, I just thought the layout was stunning. So much light, a lot of windows, good, I guess, views of the ocean. You can see the ocean, which is always exciting, and a great patio, and some fun features like a spiral staircase. And then there are like 6 million bedrooms in this place, and by that I think I mean just 5, but it felt like we kept running into bedroom after bedroom. It will be a nice stay here, and the outside's also really nice. Not only do they have 3 decks, I guess, technically, that you can sit out on. There is also a large sitting area, and they even have a like fancy getting back from the beach shower. So this was like pretty insane. And with that, we were all hungry, so we walked down to the restaurant that was close to us, where we got some fun drinks and our first taste of lobster. And then we will be going to bed. On today's agenda, we are going grocery shopping and just generally getting settled. But first, before we headed to the shops, I just wanted to run down and look at the beach since I hadn't seen it yet. And I know this is a funny thing to film, but look at how intense this like Trader Joe's Joann's parking situation is. It is just like so over the top decorated. It's crazy. After that, we went to the fish market, which is where we picked up some fish to cook at home. This was just kind of fun and novel. I mean, it's not that novel. I live in Seattle and I can go to fish markets like this, but the prices were pretty crazy when you compare them to what they cost in a restaurant. And while my mom went and like paid for the fish, I wandered outside to look at this little like river inlet situation. It's so pretty here. And we looked out, and for our first day we had really good weather. And then we drove back, of course, to the place after picking out our fish. I could drive around here forever. There's so many pretty houses and interesting viewpoints and stuff like that I really enjoyed looking at all the different things there were to see. I then joined the rest of my family down at the beach. I know this will probably not shock many of you. I am not a lay down beach goer, so I am instead like a beach walker and a beach comber. And what was so wild here is, as you can see, there's just all these buildups of these slipper snail shells, and I just don't feel like I've seen so many seashells of like one type on a beach in a really long time, if ever. From my research, it seems like the proliferation of these shells is, as you would guess, climate change related, rising ocean temperatures, and all that really fun stuff to try to not think about while you're on vacation. It was really fun to just like be on the beaches here. They're so significantly different from what I'm used to being a West Coaster, and again, I just like couldn't get over the piles and piles and piles of these slipper shells. They, especially right here, they are so dense plants and are just everywhere. I eventually did make it to the very end of the beach where there is a like inlet river situation again with like walls. This was just kind of the goal. I just wanted to walk the whole beach and I did. And my reward for walking the whole beach was walking it again back. And then this here are the goodies I found beachcombing. I don't usually keep everything I find because I don't need everything I find. So usually I sort out my favorites and keep those. But we have a good variety of scallops, jingles, which I still don't really understand what those are, and then this razor clam here to the side. I just picked up this razor clam actually to show my family the difference between the East Coast razor clams and our razor clams in the Pacific Northwest. This is kind of the shell haul before I cull it. And then part of dinner is oysters, and that is it for the day. I'm so excited for today. We are exploring the Brewster Flats, which is a spot that the ocean floor is exposed for a mile at low tide. I have never experienced anything like this. This is very different sea life than I'm used to, so I'm super pumped. So far, we found buoys. That's all. Nothing too exciting. But I will note, ocean floor feels the way you think it would, as in not sandy and instead like you're walking around and decomposing little bits of things. Like it's squishy. Sorry, that might be TMI. It's pretty mucky, and you can see like fish bones and things like that abound in this area. But yeah, this was super interesting and fun to do. And also because the ocean floor is full of decomposing things, it was quite a bit stinky. Like this is definitely not that tide pools in Washington smell great, but they don't smell as bad as this smelled. But I went into all of this expecting it. I have been around many smelly sea things in my life, so this was no shock. One of the things spotted here is this weird little jellyfish thing. Here's finally a good little video of a hermit crab. There were so many hermit crabs. If you stood anywhere for too long, you would actually feel them like crawling on your toes, which was kind of fun. I mean, it could be something that you very much don't like. It depends on what you're okay with, but if I know what's scrambling across my toes, I can live with it. Here we also had our first and I believe only horseshoe crab sighting on this flat. I got deep into researching horseshoe crabs and they are fascinating creatures, so if you're ever looking for a weird rabbit hole to go down, highly recommend. Their blood is like so important for us, and the way we harvest it is super creepy. I'm always looking for shells, and I caught a good one here. And after quite a bit of walking, we finally made it to our first little like rock patch. It was interesting because there were all these bags of like what looked like either oysters or mussels kind of sitting around on these rocks. Also warning, I'm gonna show you a big dead fish corpse, so if you want to skip that, just skip a few seconds in the future. Here is said big dead fish, super interesting with the gills poking out. I haven't really seen anything like that. I am a kind of gross human and I'm fascinated by when things wash up on beaches like this and look like that. So here's a close-up of those like mixed shellfish bags. That's what was so interesting, is they weren't just oysters. They had like oysters and clams, and they were just kind of like mixed bags of things. So okay, I did a quick Google as I filmed this voiceover, and these are indeed oyster flats for growing oysters. Apparently in Cape Cod they don't have enough things to cling to, so it is like popular to have aquaculture, which is just what they call growing oysters instead of agriculture. Aquaculture, ha ha ha. So that's what these were. Always fun to see, always interesting. I love seeing different ways that food is made, and those nets that I was talking about earlier that had all the shellfish in, those are the same exact thing. And here's a little hermit crab guy I abducted because I am nothing if not a menace to wildlife. I do not claim that I have the best tide pool behaviors. I don't abuse or kill animals, but I am inclined to sometimes pick them up. As also demonstrated here with this giant snail. These snails were fascinating. They actually moved around relatively quickly, pretty wild stuff, and they seem to be plenty and doing well, so I don't feel too guilty picking it up. Here's one of those snails actually moving. I know it's like not speedy fast, but this is much faster than I expected them to move. This is one that I picked up and he's like burrowing himself back in, which is always fun to see. I think he's no worse for wear, hopefully, by me picking him up. And it is here that I found my first sand dollar of this coast, which I was not sure if this one was dead enough, so I put it back because he's still pink. I don't know. I don't like killing animals for shells, so if I think it might still be alive, I don't keep it. So the bivalve and mollusk, I was going to say culture, is very intense here, which I guess is probably true, but I just mean the wildlife and seeing different types of wildlife. This is a clam, and it's like moving around, sticking its foot out. It has its head out. They're little neck clams, and it's just kind of like skippity doodling through the water, and it was just really cute and kind of fun, and I've just never really seen a clam move like that. My experience with clams, oysters, pretty much everything on the west coast is usually they are anchored to a rock and they don't really move. So that was kind of fun. Okay, I'm gonna give another warning. If you don't want to watch a clam get eaten by a snail, skip for a bit. Maybe a little longer than the last one because I found this fascinating, so we're going to talk about it. So while walking across the flats, we heard this little like squeaking, and it was actually this clam moving. Every time it moves, it makes this tiny little squeaking sound. I didn't capture it on camera, so I have nothing for you. And what you can barely start to see, a gray movement in the earth down there, and that is a snail actually creeping up on it. You see it starting to about come out right about here. This is not going to be a fast eating of the clam. So what we realized is the clam is trying to get away from the snail. I am not one to judge someone for eating clams. I personally am a clam eater, so I was not going to intervene with Mother Nature. So we all kind of sat here and watched this snail attack this clam, which is a choice. I did turn this off and just watch the clam for a little bit because this was a very slow process, but here you can see the snail has started to get a hold of the clam. The clam is struggling. At this point, we were all feeling really sad and really terrible. But again, like, it's not our job to save clams, even though I still feel very weirdly like I did something wrong in not saving this clam. So the snail gets a hold of the clam. He has a hold of the clam, and it actually like closes its shell in on itself. It uses its foot and scoops it under, closes the shell on top, and then it drags it down into the sand. So yeah, this is I guess kind of dark, but it's nature, you know? Sometimes nature isn't the most kind. So hopefully you enjoyed this animal documentary of the snail eating the clam. And that concludes our National Geographic experience at the Brewster Flats. Also, the green grass here is super interesting. I super enjoyed this. I know I probably don't seem outdoorsy, but I love stuff that is like this. We then drove to what would be our first of a gajillion lighthouses of the trip. But first, I was looking down on the beach and enjoying these beach roses. You can actually make quite a bit of edible and other interesting like herbal remedies with these beach roses if you know what you're doing. I didn't do anything while I was there. We weren't there long enough, but you can harvest the petals and do lots of cool stuff with them. I can only say this because I saw so many lighthouses, but this lighthouse was not impressive in my opinion. I mean, it's fine. It's just the view wasn't that great. They also had it just like so fenced off, which just seems silly to have it this blocked from the public, especially considering all the other lighthouses we're going to go to where you can get a lot closer at, it seems like, all hours of the day. And now we are driving home. I just find always these like bays with all the boats sitting in them and kind of like the houses and their piers really interesting. This is something I've seen quite frequently on the East Coast, but I don't think I've ever seen it on the West Coast. So it's always just something I find fascinating. And as always, I'm just enjoying my time staring out the window as we drive back to where we're staying before we will then head out to dinner and prep for our big day trip tomorrow. Here we are headed out of the Yarmouth Harbor to go to Nantucket for the day. This is about an hour and a half maybe ferry ride, and I'm pretty used to ferries, but this one was fun. There were lots of seats outside, which is what we did, so lots of wind flying, hair flying, the whole thing. And of course I filmed a really nice departure, or thought I filmed a really nice departure out of the harbor. I didn't realize until now that I had never actually hit the record button, so getting the less scenic view of our way out the harbor. And in what was seconds for you and over an hour for me, we have arrived in Nantucket. There's this little tiny short guy, a little lighthouse here out on the beach. This was a really pretty ferry ride in. It's so funny, I have not had the urge to watercolor paint in a really long time, but for some reason being on Nantucket made me want to get my watercolors back out and start painting again. I know vacation me will go back to real life me, and real life me will say, wow, you have so many hobbies, we don't have time to add watercoloring on top of it. But it was kind of fun to feel the urge to paint in a way I hadn't in a very long time. Also cool were these like luggage pushy things that they were all bringing around, but we did patiently wait to get off the boat. We did not rush to try to be like the first people off, so we just kind of sat and watched everybody get off the boat first and the luggage, which was fun. After grabbing coffee, we hopped on a bus to head out to the Sconset Bluff walk, which is supposed to be really picturesque. Here's us arriving in Sconset. Sorry, apologies, my pronunciation for East Coast stuff is probably going to be pretty horrendous. My sister's always a champ and films me while I walk. This here is the beginning of the Bluff walk, where you go through kind of these rows of Cape Cod houses. It's very picturesque, very fairy tale and fun. And again, it just really made me want to paint. I did have to dodge a bee there though. Bugs, always going for me because I think my pink hair is a flower. Now I'm going to take over to enjoy the flowers, gardens, flower boxes of this beginning part of the walk. I mean, this garden is stunning. It made me want to live here, even though I am also 100% sure I would never want to live here. But this garden is magical. I was pointing and talking about all the different flower types because that's what's stuck in my brain. From here, we move out of the cottages into the like real walk where there's like tree roots and poison ivy and things like that. We're going to begin the walk. We're actually headed up to the lighthouse. So we're going to be walking on this for a couple miles. So what was really fascinating to me here is all of these, not all of these homes, but a lot of these homes have like a private beach access where you're not allowed to use that, but you're allowed to like trek through their backyards. And I just find that kind of strange, and I don't have much more to say about it than that, other than this was a beautiful walk that I thoroughly enjoyed. It's pretty crazy how high up and off the beach we are in most of these cases. And it was actually really hot, so the shaded parts of this, like in the trees here, were really enjoyable. Honestly, it's so fun to traipse through people's backyards that I was just overall a huge fan, or like right behind people's backyards. I'm nosy, I like looking at people's backyards, so this was very, very, very enjoyable for me. Along the trail near someone's backyard, they had painted all these shells with like little jokes that you could flip over, like where do pirates get their hooks? The secondhand store, ha 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 ha. So appropriate for my channel, but I thought these were very, very fun. I will say the last half mile of this was kind of painful because we were no longer on a path and we're on a road and it was hot, but we did finally make it to the lighthouse. This is Sandcaddy Lighthouse, or Head Lighthouse, I guess technically, since it's on the head of the island. This lighthouse is, I think, my favorite one. It was the most picturesque. It was along a golf course, and then really interestingly, it had actually been moved, I think it was like 200 feet, which actually a lot of lighthouses out here have been actually like moved by people, which is pretty wild to me. It might be also like a little bit silly to move lighthouses like this, but they're so cool. I do appreciate a lighthouse. I know I kind of made fun of the last two lighthouses we've seen on this channel, but I do actually really like lighthouses, and it was so pretty here, even with a golf course next door. I also just learned so much about lighthouses during my time in Cape Cod. We later go up a lighthouse. I learned about like how they're painted, all painted differently, and each like different color coding tells you where you're at if you're sailing, as well as either their lights, like how often they blink, or really far back in the day how many lighthouses there were. So there would be like 3 where you were, and I think that's fascinating. And after our 2 miles walk back, we have reached the little cottage area again and are just getting it together before we head to the bus stop. I do love a Cape Cod style house. It's like not personally what I would want from a house, but they are really stinking cute. Also, look at this shell gravel driveway, so fun. And then back on the bus to Nantucket we go. After quickly grabbing a bite to eat, we think we have about 30 minutes before we head to the ferry. So I ditched my family for a little walk around, just looking at architecture and cobblestone and all the things I enjoy. I didn't super feel like going into all the shops here. Everything here was really expensive, and I just wanted to look at the architecture and the flower boxes and just enjoy the sights. The way they have their flower boxes planted here is just so nice. I was very much indulging myself in looking at all the flower planters. And I found this cute tiny little park that had some really beautiful planters, and also had like this nice little fountain down at the end. It was a nice quiet little thing. I will say I felt overall pretty overwhelmed in like the main tourist part of Nantucket, but once I walked into these areas, I started feeling better. I would not recommend driving through these areas. I just feel like I saw traffic everywhere. Definitely seems like if you can, the ideal is to be on foot here. I did kind of have to walk down an alley to enjoy these like planter boxes, but this one was stunning. It was outside of a restaurant, and you can see it has a big variety of foxgloves, which will always be one of my favorite plants. And now it's time for me to catch back up with my family. So I'm headed back to the kind of more main area downtown, enjoying the planters. And then, jokes on us, we didn't read our ferry time tables correctly. So we showed up almost an hour earlier than we needed to, which was a bummer because I would have much rather gone and explored a lot of those residential streets. But by the time we realized how early we were not so early I could go back and do that. And at this point, I was also not feeling very well. I was feeling like quite nauseous and like hot, and I just think I hadn't had enough water. So instead, I just sat on this bench and enjoyed this beautiful view. This time, as a ferry, we stayed inside, so you are having to deal with some dirty windows, but look at the beautiful, again, kind of short lighthouse when we get back to Yarmouth. I am definitely at this point pretty ready to get back to the house and rest. And we're gonna grill some burgers and do a bonfire and go to bed. So today it is rather disgusting outside, so the plan is to kind of stay home and lay low. I do really bad at actually doing that on these vacations, so I was pretty eager to get out. So in the afternoon, we first went to the Pirate Museum, which was actually quite enjoyable and I do recommend. So here I am going to interrupt the footage a little bit to describe a little bit more about the Pirate Museum because I wasn't able to film there. They completely like no cameras situation. I actually thought this museum was significantly better than I originally thought it would be. You just never know with niche museums what you're gonna get, and apparently this one also has like the same display that's a traveling display that's like called Pirates or something like that. But this is really interesting because this is actually the only ever found pirate treasure. It's on display in this museum as well as its traveling exhibit. I think they maybe have a sub exhibit somewhere in Boston. It is a bunch of stuff from the shipwreck of the Whydah. It also goes really into like pirate hierarchy and how it was a democracy, and there's a lot more like organization and equality among pirates than there were amongst other parts of like life back then. Of course, like these are your more organized and probably good pirates. You're probably like not very good at their pirating job pirates probably did not have the same level of like democracy and agreement, and that's why you get things like mutinies and stuff like that. But it was really interesting because they did go into like the actual social dynamics of piratry as well as showing tons of really interesting artifacts. Another thing I thought was cool, they had a lab set up in the last room that showed all the different steps they have to take to get these objects out of like the ocean sediment. So it was a really interesting and well done exhibit. It looked kind of more hokey on their website than it ended up being because on their website you see a lot of pictures of a lot of like pirate mannequins, which they do have in the exhibit, and I think it's just to like kind of keep children engaged because on the website they do very much emphasize that this exhibit is not for children, which is why I actually wanted to go in the first place, and I think they told a very cohesive story that made a lot of sense, and I just thought honestly it was a pretty good exhibit about pirates for being kind of a weird museum in a warehouse in the middle of Yarmouth and Cape Cod. I was impressed. I would recommend it, and we'll jump back into the rest of my rainy day footage. After the Pirate Museum, we had time to stop in an antique mall, and by we I mean me and my mom because the rest of my family does not so much enjoy these. There were a lot of really good things here, some at unreasonable prices and some are really reasonably priced. It just always varies the way antique shops do. I will note if you go to this one, I noticed a lot of clothing moths flying around, so please quarantine your things if you do pick anything up here, and don't bring them into your home until you've thoroughly washed them. You don't want to bring home an antique store level moth problem. And trust me, I did find a whole big bundle of linens given this booth here. It took like all my restraint here. There were so many beautiful things that I wanted to pick up, but I was disciplined and I was good, and I didn't bring too many things home. And from the antique store, we drove back to the fish market we went on the first day to pick up some yummy lobsters for dinner. My seafood loving self was very happy. These are the 3 lobsters we got, and they were delicious and also pretty cheap for lobster. Keyword for lobster. With that, we are done with this day and we'll be ready for new adventures tomorrow morning. So today we are tackling Provincetown, aka P-Town, whatever you want to call it. It was really fun to be here during Pride Month. I wasn't like super necessarily looking forward to visiting Provincetown, but honestly I ended up feeling kind of a lot of feelings here. So Provincetown is a historically gay town. Its history in 1899 is Charles Hawthorne founded the Cape Cod School of Art, which then started kind of the wheels in motion for Provincetown to become a hub and haven for artists. And with artists often come queer people, as anyone who's been in artistic and creative spaces knows. So this was a plan to revitalize the town. The town was in shambles when they established this art colony due to losing a lot of fishing boats and things like that. But once the school opened, a bunch of people came out from New York City, and a lot of people who were queer came out. And as a result, this became a local population of people who were kind of on the fringes of society. Like, this is a really good instance of like marginalized communities often come together. There were a ton of marginalized Portuguese people here, and kind of the LGBTQ community also like came in, and together they made this like, I feel like I'm getting emotional talking about this really beautiful town. And like, in the 1920s, it was a place that was known for gay people to be accepted. And it just like kind of meant a lot to walk around in a place that it felt like who I am as a gay person was like the default and not like unusual. Or, I mean, I live in a city where this is super true, where like being queer is pretty accepted, but it was really just different to like see lots of different types of pride flags that are like niche and you don't necessarily know if you're in the community, and to walk into every store and see like such open support of queer people, and just see so many queer people. I have never seen, like outside of Pride, I don't feel like I've ever seen such a condensed amount of gay people as I did walking around Provincetown. There's just not many places that I've like felt like the not marginalized, I guess, and kind of like the default. It was almost felt like the default was that you were gay and you had to prove otherwise. And it was just really cool. More history on the town. Of course, around the 1950s, a lot of businesses and entertainers began to come out of the closet. This was a huge hub of queer activism and like culture, and just it has this like huge reputation as a queer safe haven. And in 2010, the US government said Provincetown has the highest percentage of couples that are in same-sex marriages. So it explains why Provincetown really made me feel seen. Kind of just a really, really cool place that I enjoyed getting to walk around in. And I feel very thankful to have gone to. And like I was absorbing this all the day. I feel like the day of, I've just never felt this way in a place. So if you're queer and if you're in the area and you can make it out to Provincetown, I highly recommend it. And yeah, it was just pretty cool. We basically walked around Provincetown till like 2 o'clock in the afternoon, and at that point we decided to head out. We also ate at the Lobster Pot here in Provincetown, and I highly recommend. It was really good. A lot of times you'll see like top spot ranked for tourists and you're a little skeptical, but I actually thought the Lobster Pot was quite phenomenal food-wise, and I actually didn't think it was terrible price-wise, considering, you know, it is still like a higher-end seafood place. It was definitely cheaper than some of the other places we ate. Oh, and one last thing before we head out of Provincetown, I have always hated bunting, and I thought it was just because it was patriotic, but here there's a lot of pride bunting, and I'm gonna stick my flag in the sand. I think bunting is ugly, period. Just think there's way more appealing ways to decorate a home. Just show a flag. If you need to be patriotic, if you want to be pride, do a flag. Bunting though, I don't know. So from here, we're gonna head out and bounce around down the coast back to where our house is, seeing some lighthouses and seeing some beaches. So our first stop is to the Highland Lighthouse, which is the only lighthouse we're going to be able to go in and go up, so I'm pretty excited about that. And apparently they are out here moving lighthouses left and right, because this was actually a lighthouse that has also been moved. So where I am standing here is where the lighthouse used to stand before they moved it back because it was at risk of falling due to erosion. I believe this is also the only Coast Guard functional lighthouse we visited, which is kind of neat. So here we've arrived at the bottom of the stairs to the tower. These are always kind of insane spiral staircases that are not the most enjoyable to go up. I always kind of get a little like dizzy / that fear of heights in me as I go up these types of things. As far as lighthouses go, though, this is definitely one of the shorter ones. Not in the Cape Cod area. In the Cape Cod area, they seem to be pretty short, but I feel like when I remember being in lighthouses on the West Coast, they're significantly taller, but I also don't know if they have as much clearance of bluffs the way that the lighthouses in Cape Cod do. So, of course, you get the view at the top. It's really hard to orient you to where you are because, like, this didn't film great, but what you just saw was P-Town, which was where we just were, and now we're looking out to the east, and you can see where we were just standing, and again, that's where the lighthouse used to be. The person doing the tour gave a really interesting lecture about the lights in here and the different lenses and things that they have put in over time, and how this is now the tiniest iteration with the LED, but all of the sailors have said they can see it bright and clear, maybe even clearer than when they had much bigger lenses here. So I highly recommend if you get to tour this lighthouse doing it. I thought the tour guides were super engaging, knowledgeable, and passionate. And then I was going down. I would have to say going down I dislike more than going up. And then we stopped at Marconi Beach real quick. My dad just wanted to see it. It was interesting. The surfer out there later came in because there were seals around and about, and due to sharky sharks, you're not really supposed to be surfing where there's seals. This beach did have a nice new wooden staircase while we were here, which was fun. And it was fun to see like the big bluffs going over the beach. It's not that these don't exist in Oregon and Washington, they just look really different again. So it's always just fun to see different types of landscape. And I initially wasn't going to because I didn't want to get sand in my shoe, but I did actually walk down on this beach. And our sort of last lighthouse on this list was Sconset Lighthouse. This one I also thought was really quite striking. I will say all the lighthouses we've seen so far today, 10 out of 10. I thought it was quite pretty and tall, and I do love the red. And I thought it did sit in a nice scenic little area. They have also moved this one though, because like I said, they're moving lighthouses like crazy out here. It's almost like it's easy. It's not. That was a joke. And if you follow a path, you can go see the Three Sisters Lighthouse, which we did follow. I have two sisters. We are the Three Sisters. We're not lighthouses, though. Sorry to disappoint. It was just kind of fun to see these. They're pretty short, and my understanding from what I was reading at some of the other lighthouses we visited so many lighthouses, is back in the day, there was one lighthouse that had one, and then there was another lighthouse that had two, and then this lighthouse had three, and that number of lights was what signified where you were on the coast for a sailor, because back then they didn't have the technology to make them blink. So I thought that was really interesting. And here is just an overlook on the beach. We didn't go down to this beach because it seemed like quite the trek. And this is my last morning here in Cape Cod. We're traveling back all to our different states at the end of today. It's always fun to meet up with family when you have family that lives as far apart as mine does, with people in Denver, San Diego, and DC, and of course me in Seattle. It's always a treat to get to meet up and see each other and go on such fun trips. So I always really appreciate that my parents still prioritize these. One last thing I am going to note, there are bajillions of hydrangeas here, and I'm so sad we weren't here during hydrangea season. Hydrangea season here must be spectacular. Before we got out of town, we went putt-putt golfing or mini golfing, whichever you prefer to call it. I don't know if it's regional or what the deal is. This was a really fun pirate-themed course. We did go on another mini golf course, but I didn't think it was as fun as this one, so I didn't take much footage. But this one was spectacularly done, and also the accessibility on this one was really cool. They had one course that was wheelchair accessible and another course that wasn't, and the course that was wheelchair accessible, they went as far as there's one hole that you would have to go upstairs potentially to play, but they made a second version down below where you wouldn't have to go up steps, and I just thought that was incredibly impressive because I have not been to, I feel like, any mini golf courses that have thought about accessibility. Accessibility is so important. And also, they get a 10 out of 10 for style, so top-notch mini golf course, I highly recommend. And with that, it is back on the plane for a very long flight back to Seattle. I will say I'm ready to go home and see my cat. Alrighty, you have seen all of the footage. We will have the haul coming Friday. Like, my final thoughts on Cape Cod. It was really fun. I'm glad I went. I don't think I'll ever probably go back. I felt like I saw enough, and it just wasn't enough of what I'm interested when I travel. The only place in Cape Cod I can really see myself going back to is Provincetown, and I would only go back there if I was there with like a bunch of my gay friends and we were doing gay things. And if that's the case, we're more likely to go. There's another that's actually just more lesbian town, a little bit further, I believe, south in Massachusetts. So it's more likely we would end up there anyway. So yeah, I don't know that I see myself going back to Cape Cod, and it's not that I don't recommend it or don't think it was a good trip. It just, I felt like I saw everything I need to see, and I have so much of everything else in the world in the United States that I'd like to see before I would consider returning back to Cape Cod. I always enjoy your guys' comments on these. You guys always have a lot of great insight, or maybe you live in the area and you throw out suggestions. We always love that. And of course, commenting down below helps me out, as does giving this video a thumbs up. I really appreciate it, and I will see you Friday for the haul video. Bye!